Ken Cox, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, Elliot. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for asking. Excited to dive into today's conversation with you, get to know you a little bit better, and discuss all the things that we're going to discuss today. So, before we do that, can you give the listeners a bit of context about who you are and what it is that you do?
My name is Ken Cox. I don't care for the title entrepreneur, but it has been, I can't seem to get away from it. I prefer business owner, but it seems like business owner is not the title that the world wants me to have. So, entrepreneur, my day job, I operate a data center called Hosterian. We're in St. Louis. We own and operate the data center, catering to primarily St. Louis mid-sized businesses, but we also do some of the largest companies in the world, and we also like, mom and pop corner stores. So all across the board in IT. I own Box STL, which is the largest boxing school in St. Louis, and I've got a couple other side ventures. I've got a book coming out with Kevin Harrington on October 1st, 24, called Many Paths to Profit. And my book, which is very personal to me, Reclaim Sobriety, is coming out November 19th. It'll be on Amazon, and that's a more personal story to me to help other men and women with their struggles through addiction and that are primarily, in my opinion, high functioning people that are recovering. There's not really a program that I found that worked for me, so I decided to write down what worked for me and share that with everybody else.
Yeah, I'd love to get to know a little bit more about that because obviously we've had a very brief conversation so far, but you don't strike me as someone who had problems with alcohol, who was an addict at any point in your life, which is pretty commendable, right? The fact that I can't see any part of that. So where did that journey all begin, and how long has it been since you transitioned out of that challenging period of your life?
Yeah, so drugs and alcohol are part of my life since the beginning. My mom was homeless when I was born. My first apartment that I lived in was above a bar. She was a bartender, so I lived in the bar. She met my stepfather. I guess I was around 2 years old. They got married, and he was an alcoholic. He was at the bar all the time. So I've been drinking since I can remember. My first time missing school because I was too drunk was seventh grade, or I was the seventh, so second grade. And I got arrested at 13 and did my first run with the AA, which all taught me how to be a highly functioning alcoholic, right? So, going into my 20s, being able to cater to my early 20s, I was in the entertainment industry, which did not help. I was stage manager for bands, right? So access of everything in the world that you can think of. And when I was 24, I transitioned to IT, and my ability to cater to executives' whims and party all night gave me the ability to close bigger deals than some other guys, right? And put myself in positions with people in other countries because I would stay up late and I would have these meetings and I could do all that stuff. And so it just consistently rewarded me until I was 39 years old when I was diagnosed with liver disease. And almost died from withdrawals a couple times. So, highly functioning throughout the whole thing. To the world, obviously, family life's kind of, struggling. Everything's struggling, just held together. And there was a whole bunch of, trying to quit throughout that things. But then those last 10 years, roughly from 39 to 49, which I'm 49 now, these last 10 years have been a game changer.
Yeah, it sounds like exactly that. And I'm curious, there's two things that popped out to me specifically in that story that you told me just then. And the first is that it only taught you how to become a highly functional alcoholic when you went to AA. Can you explain what you meant by that?
So I went to AA in my first time. It was a different kind of program. The fundamentals of 12 steps were there, but it was coupled with another program called Tough Love, and it was, in the 80s. The concept of identifying as an alcoholic and being in rooms with people that know how to hide what they do and do it at a level which they at least think that they're fooling the world, that's taught me how to navigate that world. And for me, I never tried to hide it. I just put it right out there in the forefront. I was like, well, if I'm going to identify as an alcoholic, I might as well just be one and own it for the whole world. And that was the persona that I just adopted. And it was, oddly enough, not only accepted, but rewarded in our society.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So didn't work for you pretty much whatsoever from that perspective. Because a lot of people it does work for, interestingly enough. I mean, there's a large percentage of people that obviously it doesn't work for as well. So why do you think it just didn't stick for you? Because of the acceptance piece, or what was missing there that other people seem to take away from it that just didn't work for you?
Yeah, and I think it works for people that are in denial, right? That they have to overcome that, hey, this is a problem. I always subconsciously knew it was a problem. I just didn't care. Like, consciously, I did not care. And my reward system for doing it was so great that I was okay carrying the title alcoholic. It was just okay with me. I didn't care. And that, if I was in this perpetual, oh yeah, we're going to quit next month. We're going to quit next year, right? We're going to do a sober January kind of thing. And then, there was a whole set of time where I tried, moderation and, I'm not going to get rid of it completely. That kind of world just didn't really work either. I wanted it to, right? I identified as an alcoholic, and I saw that not only did I identify as an alcoholic, I identified as that men in general drink beer. They drink whiskey. That's part of what makes you a man. So that, I had a double toxic, multiple layers to my toxic belief structure, and all of that. So, I think that some programs that don't just look it in the face and take personal responsibility for it failed in that particular case scenario.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I can see how it can be advantageous for someone who is in denial, someone who's not really accepted the fact that they are alcoholic and maybe has just been trying to escape that reality for a long time, but it was impossible for you to escape that reality because it was just as common to you as a child as cartoons on a TV were, right? So it makes sense that you didn't have the issue of acceptance because you knew that it had been present in all of your life. And this is a really interesting part as well that I'd like to tap into is the rewards that you got off the back of that habit as well. And I find this to be really quite interesting because this happens in the world of people being workaholics as well, right? Their quote unquote negative trait that people would say if you're looking at them from a balance perspective or a family perspective seems to be exactly that, the thing that they kind of know that they should work on. But at the same time, they are getting all the accolades. They're beating everyone because of this quote unquote negative trait that they're having. So they're in two minds of whether they should give that up or not, because if they give that up, then they're going to lose their edge and their advantage, the same way that you probably weren't able to stay up late at night, talk to people in different time zones, go out and drink with these people and make these deals, right? So how did you come away from that? Because I think that that's something that a lot of us go through. I think it's also in the world of kind of healing and trauma and stuff like that. A lot of people got this chip on their shoulder, and that's why they work incredibly hard and they get a lot of success from it, but they feel a little bit empty. They feel a little bit unfulfilled, and maybe they run into some real big health challenges like you did as well. So talk to me about that transition. How obviously you had the liver issues that came up, which is obviously going to be a big kind of smack in the face in a sense, which makes sense that you wanted to make some changes. But also at the same time, it was probably quite hard to let go of that identity that you pinned part of your masculinity on, and you also gained a lot of success from for many decades of your life. So can you break that down for us?
I don't think I've ever had that question posed that way before. So I'm wildly fortunate that my entire team around me is just wildly supportive and understanding. Coming out with an issue wasn't any part of the problem, right? Like letting people know that I had liver disease and I was quitting drinking was like, oh yeah, that figures, right? Like, yeah, just kind of saw that coming,
Yeah,
right? So
sense.
that was not a big deal. The liver disease came at a really challenging time for the business as a whole. One of our big sectors was the coal industry. And our largest client filed bankruptcy that same year. One of my co-founders, Steve, not only my co-founder, my mentor, I don't think he passed away that year, but he left the business with throat cancer, and then passed away within a year of that time. And I was liver disease and all those things. So I went to my largest shareholder of the company. I'm like, look, this is what's going on. Everybody's telling me we should just wrap it up and walk away. I've got these medical issues, but I'm addressing them head on, right? The doctor's giving me good prognoses, all these things, I can recover. So what do you want to do? And he was wildly understanding, partially because we had lost one of our partners, I think, or was losing one of our partners at the time. He's got a reputation with Hole in the City, with his entrepreneurship as well. So He said either we'll fund the shutdown of the business or we can try to dig ourselves out of this. So I was digging myself out of a financial problem in the business while I was also doing this at the same time. So I think luckily for me, my struggles were anybody that was watching me that had a stake in my game understood all the struggles that I was going through, right? And they were very gracious with me through that entire process. Not only my business partners, I don't have the same exact staff that I had then, but I have some key components of my staff still. And obviously my wife, daughter, and son played a big role in being there and understanding and providing grace through it, because it was very challenging.
Yeah, I bet. And then obviously on the flip side of that, you've come out on the other side. So what did that period of time look like? Not necessarily deep in the struggle, but the transition out into a good place where you're now living alcohol free, in a better place with your liver. Business is rebuilding as well. But how do you not get tempted to go back into those bad habits that got you into that place in the first place?
Yeah, so that was a giant struggle. And this is where, when I made the decision to go ahead and write Reclaim Sobriety and publish that book. So right out of the gate, I was pissed. I'm like, not only do I have to lose my best friend, the doctor's telling me I have to drag him out back and shoot him, right? Like, this is my responsibility to have this breakup. And this is my comfort zone, my reward system, everything that I've had since I was a little kid. And wildly challenging. Forget the physical withdrawals that almost kill you, put me in the hospital, all those things. I got to the point to where the doc's like, your liver counts are good, right? We're trending, everything's in the right direction. Talked him into, does that mean I can have a beer with dinner here and there? Yes. Okay. And then, that goes to, I'm going to the lab testing clinic once a week and get my blood work done for my liver panel so that I know what my liver counts are, so I know how much I can drink that week, right? And watching that and trying to play that game, which was just absurd, right? Like, who the fuck does that? That's crazy. So I was so dead set on this. Well, I want to be a normal person for a very long time. And I attempted it, and it always led to the same deal. Well, that happened yesterday and nothing bad happened. Let's do it today. We'll keep an eye on the liver numbers, all this self-talk about how do I continue this relationship that I have until something clicked in my mind. I can't, it was all the mind tricks, everything that you can think of. What I ended up doing was taking the same techniques that I used at my boxing school for these kids, right? Because I teach kids to go from just regular kids in 6th, 7th grade, afraid to do a play. I bring them through a training camp, and now they're fighting in competition in the ring, right? And I do a lot of mindset coaching with them, and I'm like, let's take that same coaching and put it on me. And I started doing that same practices, but I just wrote them all out and I made them for me, using a lot of the same stuff that AA taught me, using a lot of the same stuff that Smart Recovery taught me. The two, and I can pinpoint the exact parts where they both failed for me. AA was not personal responsibility, and Smart was allowing me to be a moderator. And I said, I can't do either one of those things, so I had to re-identify myself as a sober person. And in the book, we call them sober gladiators, right? So I had to figure out how to do that, and I had to change my mindset of who I was. Not only who I was as a person, because I was an alcoholic and that was okay, relapse is expected, but also what a man is. I had to reframe what that was in my head, because if I didn't, drink booze and womanize and fight, then I wasn't a real man for some reason. So until I realized that and I started implementing those techniques, that I go to pick up a beer one day and go, wait a second, that's just not who I am anymore. Right. And then 100% of the cravings are gone. I probably still have triggers, but I don't, that's a lifetime of uncovering those. But, with that mindset coupled with a lot of the tools that I've learned from all these other programs was the trigger. was the catalyst to get there, and it's one of the greatest feelings on the planet.
It's amazing. And that's the complicated thing about alcoholism or any type of addiction or challenge. People think it's as simple as just stopping using the substance and kind of everything's fixed off the back of that. Obviously, there's going to be triggers there and there's relapses and all those other types of things. But no one bears in mind the fact that you have to re-identify who you are as a person and what it means to be a man for you, right? Like no one really unpacks that part of the situation. They're like, okay, Ken has a drinking problem because he's been drinking for as long as he remembers. Not Ken identifies as part of being a man as someone who has a whiskey in their hand or drinks a beer. And if he doesn't, then what does that mean he is? Do you know what I mean? So it's like one of these crazy things that I think a lot of us don't realize. And I work with a lot of people when it comes to health and fitness as well. I do a lot of fat loss coaching. A lot of people think it's as simple as, okay, I'm going to get myself onto a good diet plan. I'm going to get myself onto a good training program. And, 6, 12, 18 weeks later, maybe a little bit longer, I'm going to be in the shape of my life. But then they realize, oh, why was I using food as such a clutch in the first place? What does it mean when I take away that on a Friday night? How do I now deal with my problems? Because this was actually the way that I was navigating all of my stress for the past 3 decades. Or this was the only thing that made me feel safe when no one was around when I was younger. And I think sometimes the vice doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether it's alcohol or drugs or food or whatever it might be. It's just what people latch onto because it's what was maybe normal to them, and that would suggest the same given your story growing up. It's like alcohol was around and it was kind of a thing that you were able to access and everything along those lines. But who knows, if you weren't living above a bar or below a bar, maybe it would have been food, or maybe it would have been drugs, or maybe it would have been something different, right? So I love that piece that you mentioned. There's a lot of self-awareness there to say that actually I needed to actually really think about who I was as a person and redefine that person. Otherwise I was never going to get sober.
And I think defining sober is such a weird thing. I was not going to live the rest of my life with this. Sobriety means I'm pissed off and I'm constantly having triggers and I'm constantly desiring this thing that I can't have, right? It's torture, man. Like it's absolute torture. It is its own prison. So, I don't know how a human can thrive in life with this constant thing that they desire. And you really, truly, honestly desire it more than almost anything else in the world. And you're constantly not giving it to yourself. So you have to break that chain and remove that desire for that thing and just remove it from your existence completely. I don't know how anybody could, that's an addict, do moderation and be successful at any time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, that sober isn't necessarily, well, maybe it is just the abstinence from whatever the substance is, but at the same time, it's not just being sober. It's about being able to live the quality of life that you want to alongside that. It doesn't matter if you've been able to be, well, it does. I mean, there's certainly benefits to being 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or 7 years, whatever it is, sober. But at the same time, if you're living every single day, desiring, missing, like not really living your life because you're afraid of the triggers that might set you down that path again, what type of life is that? And I mean, it might be physically healthier than the life you're living before, but mentally, is it? I mean, there's question marks there, right?
I think it's still mentally better. I think you need that time in your rearview mirror to get there, right? I took every coaching program under the planet, right? I hired Tony Robbins and Dean DeGrasso. I went and got certified as a high flow coach so I can understand the dopamine flow and the norepinephrine flow and all that stuff, right? Just constantly doing those things. It really started when I was coaching my team and I'm seeing these kids that are afraid now going to these super challenging things. And I'm like, we're really changing how they feel about themselves, right? We're taking awkward kids and turning them into what we call gladiators. There's something there. They're changing how they feel about themselves. So sponsors and all that stuff is great, but having a coach that holds you accountable and then find, there's a billion tools in this bucket, right? Like there's literally a bucket of a billion tools, but knowing when to put a specific tool into a specific case scenario for, either overcoming a hurdle or detecting a craving or having an exit strategy, and having all of those tools and implement them as a coach is wildly different than a sponsor that says it'll be okay and your last relapse is just, it's just a step in this process. And, I think for highly functioning addicts, they need something a little more direct.
Yeah, that's it. And that's what I love about coaching and then the work that I do as well. It's interesting when I'm working with a client is that I can already see the challenge they're about to anticipate before it even happens. And I immediately have maybe at least a set of 3 tools that I have about a 90% success rate that it's going to work for them because I've seen it happen countless times before. And I've got those tools in my toolbox and I've gone through aspects of it myself. And I've also gone through many times with other people. It's not the same as just like kind of being there for moral support. And I can do that moral support and the accountability piece, but there's levels to the game, right? There's levels to trying to get someone not just to a stage where they are kind of living in kind of the suboptimal place to actually thriving, to focusing on bigger things in life as well. So I like that a lot. And I want to get onto those steps in just a minute. But before I do, I have a question about your version of success since that transition, right? And obviously you were very successful from a professional standpoint when you were very thick in the alcohol side of things. And now on the other side of that, I do have a genuine question and I want the most genuine answer you can possibly give me because a lot of people when I ask them, they're like, well, I've got all these other aspects of my life. I'm a better family man. I'm a better this. I'm a better that. And I'm like, that's amazing. But point blank, would you say that you performed better professionally in the past when you had all those vices and you were able to stay up at night and all those types of things? Or would you say you're a better professional today based on those transitions that you've made? Not a better family man, not a better friend, not a better other things, just professional.
Right. And I see the nuance in the question. The answer is inevitably yes. There is a time frame of a very, very bumpy road, right? So I'd understand why a lot of professionals, I'm super lucky. I'm a stakeholder in the company. I was the president in the time. It was like on my shoulders to carry the company. And if I was walking away, we were going to fund the exit of the company. Not the case anymore, right? We're back to healthy and strong and all those things. But it was bumpy, man. There was days that I couldn't come in, right? There were days that were struggling. One of the things that you have to do in this game to truly find happiness at the end is you have to learn to love and respect yourself in a way. Well, I think you have to learn to love and respect yourself. And if you thought that you did before, then you need to do it in a different way than you did before, right? Because once you get there and you identify as a sober person, it's almost impossible to take a drink, right? Like you realize that that's poison and you're not going to do that to yourself and you wouldn't do that to somebody that you love and respect. And all the emotional work that you go through, right? So, creating new boundaries with staff and all those things is really hard, right? Because I had staff that, wouldn't perform well. We'd go out drinking, we'd blow it under the thing, and then the next day, we're back to the same old cycle. And I would just let those things happen because it was easier to drink them away or, whatever. So wildly bumpy transition. And there's business that I'm just not going to get anymore, right? I'm not going to be able to close the deal by taking the IT staff out to the bars one night and showing them all a great time so that they're talking to the CFO the next week and I get the business, right? That's not a tactic I can use any longer. Wildly effective tactic, just not a tool that I get to use anymore. So I have to find other ways to do it, which makes me more creative, which pushes me harder. I would say, as far as business goes, we're not as big as we used to be, but we're more profitable, right? So less size, but more profit. So that's good. But at the end of the day, that's good. I just don't have the tenacity to juggle as many balls and let as many things fail anymore, right? Because that was the MO. We'll go after 100 things and 90 will fail, but 10 of them will be really successful, and that'll be okay. So I have to have a little more mindfulness on how I'm approaching things because I just can't do as many things as I was able to with the failure rate that I was comfortable with at that time, right? I'm less acceptant of those failures today.
It's a phase where you have to exchange quick success for longevity. I think that's what I'm hearing there as well, is that you might not be able to use those same tools and get some quick wins and some quick deals that would make you maybe a good amount of money or put your business in a really good position. But if you were trying to do that for decades, and this obviously depends on what your priorities are, but it sounds like you want to be a business owner, not an entrepreneur, or a business owner, whichever you like to call it, for years to come, right? You want to stay within your company, you want to see it succeed, you want to see it thrive. And at the end of the day, you might be able to, again, throw yourself at these deals and everything along those lines for a certain amount of time, but it doesn't have longevity in it. And there's only so long maybe you can be so singularly focused on a certain pursuit before you had your family in the background. You mentioned you had daughter, a son, you had a wife as well. I'd love to ask you some questions about that in a moment, but then if you're not willing to see those other things fall to the floor, then you have to change your approach and you have to think more long term. And I think that what you've done well is that you've not kind of, again, you updated your identity, because it might have been hard to let go of that and like, damn, I'm missing out on all of these potential deals. But it's not that. It's more the sense of saying, well, actually, those deals aren't available to me anymore because that's not the game I'm willing to play. And you're okay with that. You're like, well, I'm going to go play a different game. It's going to make me more creative. It's going to make me have to think in different ways. And potentially there is an opportunity for even more growth there. So I like that transition and that update. How did your family handle all of this? I can imagine they've seen you at various different stages, and I'm sure they're loving the Ken that they're seeing today.
They are. My relationship with my wife is going very well. We run the gym together, right? So we're 50-50 partners in the gym. I coach the youth team, and then she kind of runs the front office and keeps the staff, and she's the general manager. So we work very, very closely together. It was my therapist's recommendation that the whole family get therapy and help on this, and we've luckily we have insurance that covers that thing. So the whole family is getting the help and support that they need to help navigate through this, because I'm not the person that they can go to for a lot of these things. A lot of things you just got to suck it up and deal with, right? But open, honest communication on a regular basis, no matter how uncomfortable it is, I think is the key there. And we have bumpy moments and we move forward. My son is nonverbal autistic, so he's a bit of a guessing game on how he, truly feels about that. He's 13, but he's a happy, healthy boy. So I'm super excited that I'm fit enough that at his age that I'm comfortable wrestling with him and getting some of that energy out. But so the family's doing very well. I don't think that they've processed everything yet, and I don't know that they ever will truly process everything that happened, but I think that they, can move on from the traumas that were caused by it all, and hopefully we can live a happy, healthy life together.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to transition onto the book that you wrote on those 12 steps towards your recovery. And I wouldn't even say recovery, I would say like 12 steps to thriving, really.
Yeah, we're calling it 12 steps of sobriety, or 12 rounds of sobriety. So it's all boxing themed. It's, it's 14 chapters. The first chapter is called the weigh-in. The last chapter is called the press release, and then there's 12 rounds of basically. I came up with the 12 core values of a Box STL Gladiator, which is our team name for our boxing team, and we say these core values every day. And one of the things while I'm trying to practice moderation, I'm telling these kids we do these core values every single day, so they become part of who you are, so that when something comes up to your life, you don't have to question it. You can just go to these values. And, I'm literally saying this to these kids every day, and then I'm not living it myself. And one of those values is be authentic, right? So I really started to feel, I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing this for them, but it's affecting me in a way that I did not anticipate. And I found some real power in that. And honestly, I wrote the book a couple years ago as the Gladiators, talking about the team and all that stuff. And my editor brought it back and said, Ken, it's got to be all about the booze. It can't be part about one thing and part about another. So it shelved for a couple of years, and then we came back to it, and really am proud of what it's come out as, right? So the 12 rounds are basically, it's a personal story about how I used one of these tools to overcome, part of my problems, and how I implemented them in my life, and some examples of how they can implement them for themselves, which has been a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, obviously during a boxing match, each round is going to be a little bit different, and some are going to be harder than others, especially if you make it to 12 rounds as well. So which round did you find the most difficult out of all of the ones that you traveled through as you got to your championship winning moment?
Yeah, it was in the middle. Right. So getting started was easy. right? And know I need to do it, right? Coming out of the gate, no problem. Stringing together a couple days, couple weeks, right, to a couple months, and then fail, and I'll do another couple days. Stringing days into weeks and weeks into months, occasionally weeks or months into years, but not very frequently. The middle part was tough, but then the end was like, it was like literally a light switch, right? A change in who I was. But that middle part of pause, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, was a part that once I have come through the other side of it, and I was able to recognize it, I recognized that that's where I was failing all the time, right? I would get into this mode of nothing feels good, nothing's exciting. Why am I doing this? It's this, kind of a burdensome. My wife's still pissed at me for things that I don't even know that I did 10 years ago. These arguments keep happening. What's wrong? I've not drank in 8 months, but life seems to be falling apart. That midsection is hell. And that's where I think, a lot of stuff that we talk about in the book, where, I start bringing in recovery dharma aspects into these 12 rounds, and breathing exercises and self-discovery and mindset work that I just don't see in those other programs.
And do you think that was key for getting you through that phase? What do you think that you would have done had you not had those tools to lean on?
Oh, I would have relapsed. Yeah. If I would not have had my meditation practice, my breathing exercises, my mindfulness practices, if I would not have had those things, my self-love practices, I would have relapsed. And I would have never gotten to the point of identifying as a sober man. And I never would have gotten to the point of re-identifying what I see a man as. It just would not. I don't know that would have happened.
No, I can imagine. And what do you now define a man as? Now that you've obviously moved away from it being someone who drinks a lot, who womanizes, who does kind of these typically quote unquote toxic / traditional masculine, call them values, call them traits, whatever you want to call them. Now you've moved away from those. What do you see a man as, or what do you see masculinity as?
A protector, more so. It's a weird world whenever, I can walk into a room now of sober people, and, I can have conversations with people in a whole different kind of mindset, right? Because before it was, hey, let's go have a blast. We'll forget about everything. You'll buy services from me and we'll have a good time. But now I can make connections with people on a whole different level. I don't know if it's, the vibe or the aura that you put out, but, my conversations with business women are wildly different now than they used to be. Right. And I don't know if that's because it's just, I'm not that kind of mindset of masculinity versus femininity. And not that I was ever an abuser or anything, but I think that your belief structure is, especially for me, I'm a pretty open guy. I wear my belief structure out in the open. So, everything is more professional and more precise. And I had some wildly successful times with the booze, but it looks like now the relationships are settled in longer. The value that my clients are getting is better, right? So the father that my children are getting is better, and the husband that my wife is getting is better. So a protector that runs some kick-ass businesses, that would be, and I'm very happy with that.
I like it. And it does sound like you're showing up for all aspects of your life in a much, much better way as well. So we touched on a lot of the mental aspects of this journey. How important was physical health when it came to your nutrition, your exercise? You've mentioned the boxing. I don't know how much of it you do yourself versus teaching it. Talk to me a little bit more about how important it was from a physical side of things to get yourself back into a good place.
Wildly important. So my diagnosis came, and I was talking with the wife. And so growing up in bars, and then being in the entertainment industry, working stage management for some pretty outlandish performers, fighting was something that I just did. And it was something I've always enjoyed doing in a weird way. And then for many years, just out of really something extra to do, I would work at the bars at night. So I would do my IT job in the day, and I would work at the bars at night, bartending and bouncing, which paid for, a substantial part of my habit. So when I got the diagnosis, I wasn't working at the bar for years. Because when I married my wife, we are like, well, we're done with the bar scene, right? We're not going to do that anymore. So I didn't have that itch anymore. And I found, so, I'd really like to box, but I couldn't find a boxing gym. Just couldn't find one that I liked. I had tried and looked around because I didn't want to box competitively. I just wanted to hit the bag and have a good time. Well, I found a gym, and I remember getting home the first day from that gym, and I did a 12 rounds boxing class, actually, right? So on the heavy bag, instructor led and all that stuff. And I got home and I told the wife, she's like, well, how was it? I'm like, if I can do that every day, if I can do that hour every day of my life, I can do anything, like anything. So that's when the boxing journey really started. And it wasn't 6 months later. I noticed that the owner was kind of struggling with the business. I made him an offer. We bought the gym. And, now we're 9 years into owning a boxing gym. I knew that I had to be there almost every day of my life. Like, I needed that kind of environment of fitness. And, I've got my own struggles. I do still box. I've done 2 Golden Glove tournaments. I've won one and lost and came in second for another one, not 2020 and 2022. But I busted a rib this year boxing with some of the bigger kids. And so unfortunately for boxing, the injuries kind of put me on the bench more now than they used to. But yeah, still very, very active in the sport.
Do you also think the type of exercise is really important as well? I find that there's a similar analogy to swimming. The beautiful thing about boxing is that you've got your gloves on and you have to be very present during that sport. And it's very similar to swimming, right? When you go to the gym, you still have your phone in your hand. You're flicking around on emails and podcasts and music. There's CNN playing in the corner. There's another thing on the TV over there. And as much as I love the gym, I find that that's be quite distracting many times. Whereas when I go for a run, for example, my phone's in my pocket, it doesn't come out. Maybe I do need to change the music every now and again, but I'm not really scrolling or touching my phone. And I imagine that boxing is very similar in that sense, especially if you're sparring with someone as well, because of a lack of concentration can be a big hit around the face or into the ribs that you didn't want. So did the type of exercise really matter when it came to your recovery and your investment in your physical health as well?
Yeah, I have 2 pieces of input for that particular line. The answer is yes. For me, it did. I hate exercise. I hate going to the gym. I hate lifting weights. It is just the most boring thing in the world for me. I hate running, but I loved boxing, right? And I just hitting the bag and the music being loud and all those other things was, something that I could just kind of lose my mind in the beginning. So in the beginning, boxing for me it was a way that I could lose my mind, right? Just kind of free my mind from the activity that I'm doing, all the way up to, okay, now I'm going to compete and I've got to be mindful. So it provided me the wide range of that whole aspect. But the story, that first day that I went, I remember very, very vividly. It was a big deal for me to not have my phone for an hour. Like, that was a big deal, like, huge deal. I remember calling my staff and saying, hey guys, I'm not going to be available for the next hour and 20 minutes roughly. So if you need something, you're just going to have to leave a voicemail. And I probably did that for the first month before I was comfortable having my phone in a locker for an hour, right? And that was one of the big wake up calls for me of like, wow, I'm really sick. There's something not right. If I can't put a phone in a locker for an hour there was a lot of anxiety for that first month of not having my phone with me. If something were to happen in the business, me not knowing about it for an hour was just something I could not accept.
Yeah, it does make me think that if someone wants to get into some type of sport or fitness activity, I do love the gym, but I also think that if you can do your best, I don't know, maybe iPods can make a comeback or something. So you can still listen to music, but you just put your phone in the locker, or you do a sport where you just simply can't touch it. That's what I love about swimming as well. No one's going to be taking their phone into a pool unless they're, beachside or something along those lines. You're just not going to do it. It would be unusual for you to do so. So if you can find something like that, it could be a game changer in more ways than one.
Yeah. And like even yoga there, right? So boxing, yoga, Orange Theory, rowing, any of those things. I think you hit something really hard on the head, because I remember how emotional not having my phone for that hour was. And at the end of the day, this is really learning how to navigate your own emotions, because you never learned how, right? So learning how to detachment syndrome from your phone for the hour. Seems silly now, but
Yeah, we're thinking a bit of it like the phone, but it's not the phone. It's everything that's attached behind that. It's like, what am I distracting myself from? Why am I holding so tightly onto this business and it can't operate without me? It's the anxiety, it's the depression, it's the lack of facing what you truly want. It's just like the addictions, like we mentioned earlier. The vice doesn't really matter. It's what it's clinging onto that keeps you attached. And it's the same as the phone as well. It's like, well, what's behind the cell phone? Because really it's just a mini computer, but what's the emotions and the attachment to that that's keeping you so linked to it, you know?
and it's you're the problem solver, right? If you're not there to solve a problem when somebody calls you, then are they going to call you for the next one? And it seems crazy that that's a problem, but it's if anybody else is struggling with it, man, that was a huge emotion for me. That was really, really hard. Like not as hard as not drinking any longer or changing my mindset or re-identifying what a man is, but man, it was tough. But it was one step, and it was one of the first big steps that I took.
And it's great when you don't just say, I'm just going to put my phone down for an hour and try and work out what to do with myself. I think it's really smart if you go, well, let me go find something that I have a good feeling that I'm going to enjoy. I definitely enjoyed boxing. So let me try and do something that leads me away from the phone versus having to proactively put it down and resist it. Same as, again, the addiction side things, like try and create a life where you no longer want to have that, not you're doing everything to pull yourself away from it, right? Like if you build yourself a life that is good enough without that, and you do something that fills your hour and that time so much that you don't even have the desire to grab your phone, then that's probably going to be a pretty amazing thing and much easier to do than just be like, I'm going to test my willpower and my discipline for this next hour. I don't subscribe to that belief that you need to make things harder than they need to be.
No, and living in inner conflict is probably one of the more exhausting things a human can do. It's rough.
It's consuming, super consuming. Exactly. Well, Ken, this has been a super, super fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed getting down to the depths of your story and everything you've come out from on the other side of it. It's been really fascinating and insightful. And I want to ask you a couple of final questions. And the first is, what impact do you want to have on the world with the work that you do?
So there's a line that I tell my wife sometimes when we're heading home from the gym, or we just had a fight night and one of our teammates won their fight. And I like to tell her, doesn't matter where we end up in our lives. That boy is going to sit at a dinner table with his family in 30 years from now, and he's going to talk about this night, and we were able to give that to him, right? Or at least create an environment where he could get that on his own, right? We didn't give it to him. He earned it. But like we created that pathway for that kind of empowerment. And when I think about that, everything else just kind of is okay. Like it's just okay. And then I'm confident that they're going to do the same kind of thing. Right, because that's the kind of the values that we're putting into them of teaching the next generation and those things. So there's not much more joy that I have found in life than having that thought.
Yeah, it's irreplaceable and it's pretty damn impressive. And like you said, you didn't necessarily give it to him. He obviously worked hard or she worked hard, but you facilitated it. You gave them the opportunity to actually live that out, because if it wasn't there, how would they do it, right? And how would they maybe even know that that was an option for them? So it must be incredibly gratifying. And where is the best place for people to find you? Where's the best place for people to find your books? I'm sure a lot of people, I guess that even if you're not going through any alcohol addiction, it's probably a pretty good self-development book to read anyway.
Yeah, so I think it's catered more towards men and high functioning addicts. But I think if you're not an addict, I've had, some people read it that, like, my wife has given me her feedback. She's like, I found it helpful to kind of, as somebody living with somebody with the addiction, I found it helpful to read kind of some of the things that you're going through. So I think it's good for that. It's not the intent. The intent is really, if you're in that pause moment, right? You've quit, but you just can't find happiness. It's not to help you identify as an alcoholic. That's AA. They get you through that first hump. But if you're just not finding happiness and joy, this is a tool set to help you find that, right? And re-identify yourself. And it's not even a program. It's more of like, hey, here's a bunch of tools that you would use just like we would in boxing. We're going to teach you all the tools. And, their situations are different in every single fight and every single round. What you need is the tools and the mindset to know that you have to stop identifying as an alcoholic. If you stand up every single day and say, "Hi, my name is Ken. I'm an alcoholic." In my mind, at least, and I think in a lot of people's, alcoholics relapse. That's what they do. I think it gives you a permission slip. If that's your long-term strategy, I think you might have problems, specifically if you're high functioning, because high functioning people don't turn their problems over to other people, even if that other person's God, right? They're responsible for themselves. So that's who it's really for. You can get more information on the book. You can sign up for, we'll let you know when it's released, which will be November 7th, November 19th. reclaimsobriety.com/gift. And you'll get the mini course as well at no charge if you fill that out, if you go there and fill that out. Or if you just want to learn more about me, very easy. KenCox.com is my personal website. You can learn more about me, my businesses, and kind of the shenanigans that I'm up to on a daily basis.
Ken, thank you so much for your time today. I'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes below, and have the feeling that your book is going to help a lot of people.
Thank you so much, Elliot. I appreciate it.